Watching W.Media deep dive.
See, India is one of those countries where edge is going to play a very big role, especially in the context of AI.
First time in the history, we would be experiencing the power cuts in a city like Bombay. Unfortunately, in India, the starting of the data center happened in large cities like Bombay and Chennai. Now we would see that these will shift from these particular cities to wherever there is availability of power.
You can't wait. This is the only way to become a leader, to implement nuclear energy and use that energy for data centers. I think India can become the leader, and India has that opportunity.
Watching W.Media deep dive, our exclusive video podcast series covering the cloud and data center industry and the connectivity ecosystem across South Asia and the Middle East. I'm your host, Deborah Grey, editor in chief at W.Media, and today we are taking a deep dive into building hyperscale infrastructure in the age of AI. Joining us today are our special guests, Mr. Kalyan Muppaneni, founder and CEO, Pi Data Centers, and Amit Agrawal, president, Techno Digital.
Thank you, Deborah. Nice talking to you again.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Deborah. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Before we go ahead, I was wondering if you could begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and your organization. 2 minutes to each speaker.
So,
Kalyan sir.
Pi Data Centers is a data center and a cloud organization based out of India, serving Indian companies over a decade now, almost 11 years. We serve actively over 600 clients, 600 businesses, companies across India, the length and breadth of the country. The services range from data center colocation to AI and cloud hosting. We also do some level of managed services for some companies, but by and large, our core businesses are co-location and cloud business, including AI cloud as well. That's what we have been doing, yeah, as far as the company goes. And one more thing, I think as far as our presence in the country, we have a data center in Andhra Pradesh, which has been running for about 8 years now. That's our mothership core data center. We also have operations in Kochi. We have a new upcoming data center in Mumbai, going operational by October. We also have another data center in Hyderabad, also going live by second half of this financial year. So two upcoming data centers in the new financial year in India, one out of Hyderabad and one out of Mumbai, again specifically to serve Indian businesses or enterprises.
Okay. Amit, before we move forward, I was wondering if you could just take 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about your professional journey so far and also a little bit about your organization. I'm very curious about how you're doing this balancing act between having one project, which is like a huge hyperscale project in Chennai, and you're also building these smaller edge data centers along railway tracks in partnership with the railways across India and reaching into the heartland.
Definitely, Deborah. That's a very difficult task to uh, you know put your energies together in one project which is of scale and second project which is of different volumes, right? And the volumes are also small, but yeah, this the spread out is large. So you require different kind of skill sets to do the project management also. And right from sourcing to project execution, everything is different between an edge data center and a hyperscale data center. It's a difficult task, but I think the team has now seen both the spectrums. Team has now experience across setting up small data centers quickly and large data centers with scale also. So really fortunate to have such a team with us at Techno. Coming specifically to the professional journey, Deborah, I often say we are very fortunate to be born in, at a time when we have seen how the country has grown through multiple um, stimuluses. right? First one was in terms of opening up of the market in 92, 93, when we saw a flurry of international brands coming to India. Indian markets opened up. Second was when IT and ITES services took a lot of prominence in India. And third, when we talk about now, this is the third wave that we are seeing in terms of adoption of artificial intelligence. And I'm sure what these two waves of digitization and market opening have done to India in terms of taking us towards one of the largest economies in the world. Artificial intelligence definitely will help us leapfrog that particular steps, and we'll be the third largest economy in the world very soon. Both hyperscale in nature and also edge, connecting the edges of the network. So that's the project that we have undertaken in Techno Digital.
And with that, let's take a deep dive into our topic of discussion today, building tomorrow at hyperscale, how operators are reinventing infrastructure for India's AI and cloud explosion. Gentlemen, my first question to you. India's AI and cloud demand is exploding faster than infrastructure supply. What is the biggest shift operators need to make right now to keep pace with hyperscale growth?
From a adoption perspective, I think there has to be a complete value chain that needs to be established. Um, you know, one, as you see that a major step in terms of adoption of AI is the sourcing of the hardware, right? And the sourcing of the hardware, because everything has to be imported from outside. There's a huge dependency on that. Plus, because of the likes of Google, Microsoft, AWS, uh, X, um, everybody eyeing for the piece of the hardware. The hardware has become a rare commodity now. When we talk about earlier, when we used to talk about the availability of servers and compute equipments, we never used to face such a problem. But today, we are seeing two challenges. One, the cost of acquiring the equipment is increasing, and second, the lead time is also increasing. It starts from there. Second, once you have the hardware, how would you place it in the infrastructure that is available? Third is in terms of sustainability. We have seen what AI and rapid adoption of AI has done to various different geographies, whether it was the Bay Area, which saw the fire, there was shortage of water in some cities. Practically the uh, US had to, look out for Texas as an alternate source where the data center industry would come up. We are seeing both good part and bad part in terms of AI and the massive infrastructure at scale being deployed. And soon we will start seeing that in India. Right now, if we compare our size today, as against any other developed country like US or China, we are minuscule. Today, the data center industry, even if we talk about the overall space availability today, it's not reached to a scale of even 2 gigawatts. We are consuming somewhere around 1.1 gigawatts, and we are building next 500, 600 kilowatts of data centers, right? As against US, if we see, they already have multi gigawatts of capacities, which is available, which each operator, right? So those particular issues will come up. Unfortunately, in India, the starting of the data center happened in large cities like Bombay and Chennai. Um, Now we would see that these will shift from these particular cities to wherever there is availability of power. So coming back to the point where we were talking about what are the various challenges. So operators have to ready themselves with not only resiliency in place, that how would they scale it, scale these developments that they are doing today, but also in terms of sustainability. How will they do this scale sustainably? So this is the biggest challenge that operators would have to gear up today?
One thing the operators could do to keep up with the demand is one, obviously, a lot more new capacity needs to be built. As we build these new capacities, we also have to look at the existing capacities or the legacy capacities that we have and how to repurpose some of them to fit the AI needs. So you have to look backwards and as well as into the future on how we can use the both existing infrastructure and the future infrastructure to balance this AI requirements, because you don't have to throw away what you have already built. A lot of it can be repurposed. That's one way to balance the demand. But even for the future, as we build, because general purpose computing will still continue to stay, right? So the capacity and the designs need to be done in such a way that it fits both all kinds of workloads, basically, both air-cooled, water-cooled, and liquid cooling, right? So the facilities that are built should be quickly adaptable to all these kinds of changes. So that would be one thing that we should keep in mind as we build new capacities immediately.
That's an excellent point, and we will look at it, take a closer look at it later in this discussion as well. What I want to bring to your attention right now is the question of power, because power availability has become the single largest constraint in scaling AI infrastructure. How are operators rethinking location strategy, energy partnerships, and long-term planning?
So it's twofold thing. One is location and availability of resources, and second, power availability. Now, Bombay as a location, if we see historically, has been a first choice for all the data center aspirants, as well as for hyperscalers, right? But if you ask me, Bombay this time would see a shortage of power. Already, government has told that we don't have the network available or the infrastructure available to give that much of power which will be required in Bombay. And first time in the history, we would be experiencing the power cuts in a city like Bombay, right? Now, specifically, if you see the requirement in AI is very dense and it is humongous. Whatever we have seen in traditional data centers, typically the sizes being 10 megawatt, 20 megawatts. Suddenly we are talking about gigawatts, right? And this is not a gradual shift. This is a tectonic shift in terms of the requirement. And our power infrastructure is also not ready to give such a kind of infrastructure for in foreseeable period of time. I would not say that it cannot be made ready, but for a foreseeable period of time, this is not being planned for. So that's one thing that operators need to be little observant about, that wherever there is a power availability, we should plan more. And that will gradually be the ask from every providers. And we'll soon start looking at the power infrastructure being developed near to the data center parks that we're talking about, whether it is Vizag or whether it is any other city, we would start seeing the development of power infrastructure there.
See, as far as the short term, right, I would say for me, short term is like next 3 to 5 years in terms of data center industry. If you look at it, I think the data centers would have to shift from these 2, 3 hubs to concentrated hubs to other places across the country, because India is a very big country. I mean, very similar to US in terms of how widespread the geography is. If you look at the US, in the last 10, 15 years, the demand has spread across from some of the key areas to places like Texas, Arizona, Oregon, Ohio. A lot of capacity is being built out of Ohio today. So I think a similar approach needs to be adopted by India. In addition to Mumbai and Chennai and Hyderabad, I think we also need to look at, we have seen a lot of announcements in Vizag recently coming. A lot of capacity is being planned. So Andhra is going to have a lot of capacity over the next 5 to 10 years. Similarly, other hubs like that needs to be looked into in the Indian context. And these locations should have good access to renewable power. So I think you are moving from high density metros to locations where you have power that is easily available. So you're moving closer to power, right? Moving closer to a location where it is more feasible, not only feasible from a cost perspective, but also from a scale perspective, that you can scale in terms of power, because power is going to be the king for data centers in the future. As much as technology, power is going to play a major role. So that shift to locations outside of the 2-3 metros needs to happen immediately, and Vizag is a welcome sign to that. I mean, our data center is in Amravati, for example, and I think we are very excited about putting up some capacities there in the near future, because we have access to renewable power and all of that, right? So that's one thing that needs to happen immediately from the next in a kind of the next 3-year time frame. Now, beyond 3 to 5 to 10 years, right? I think we need to look at other forms of energy, because today we are only dependent on solar. If you look at it, right? When we talk about renewable, we talk about solar and maybe a little bit of wind. But I think that's not going to cut it, long term. We need to quickly adopt other technologies like nuclear energy, how nuclear energy can be implemented in the context of data centers, right? India, I mean, the last 2 years, if you look at in the budget, there is a specific line item for developing nuclear energy locally, modular nuclear reactors. So that technology has to be accelerated very, very quickly. And there isn't a better industry than data centers to put that energy to test, right? I think because you can build data centers outside of the metros in far locations, and absolutely, that's a perfect location for nuclear modular reactors to be implemented. Or you create hubs like Vizag, for example, where you have a half a dozen players coming up. So you build these nuclear reactors closer to these locations, and then basically tap that nuclear energy for the data center. So it doesn't have to be the data center players who implement this. It could be the energy companies who implement this nuclear energy, and then give access to the data centers in the region. So that way, the scale will be there. It makes more economical sense to be able to do that. And the quality power, and for a long term, because the life of a reactor is good. I mean, what we see is about 670 years. And high quality. So I think it's the need of the hour. And to me, India has the edge to implement this even ahead of other countries like US, in my point of view. If we have the policy play into this in the right way, if we have focus on this, and if we have the right subsidies and along with the policies and other things to implement this, and if we have third-party players invest into this technology and make it available for data centers and as well as probably other industries in the region to make it more feasible. So I think this is the long-term play in terms of power, and India has a super opportunity here.
Sustainability, the design mindset is also something we need to look at. I was wondering, high density AI deployments, they require different design mindset. What would you say are the most immediate changes operators must adopt to support multi-megawatt GPU clusters sustainably?
See, when it comes to high density, right, we are seeing anywhere from 10 kilowatts to 30, 40, 50 kilowatts and beyond. Now, we have to be very conscious of the fact of what is the end user requirement for how long, because the cost of implementation of this is very, very high, and the return on investments needs to be kept in mind while implementing this. So I think there should be a mix of air, water, and liquid cooling when it comes to any data center, in my point of view, unless it is a purpose-built 100% AI-driven or AI cluster-driven data center, which you can completely adopt liquid cooling. Because I think as we get into from training to inference to the edge, I cannot believe that everything would has to be 50 kilowatts or more, right? You will have a mix of these things. So the data center designs has to be intelligent enough to balance all these different kinds of workloads, from general purpose computing to AI driven workloads to edge enabled kind of workloads, right? So all these things to be kept in mind, and I think air will continue to play a big role for a decade to come, in my point of view. People may disagree, but I think that will still be there because it can still support 40, 50, up to 40 to 50 kilowatts per rack. And then you'll have, the liquid cooling and other things that you would have to implement parallelly. So I would recommend that this is how you would balance the requirements for AI.
See, whenever there is a high density power requirement, it comes with its own solution. When the power densities were in range of 6 kilowatt to 8 kilowatts, there were different technologies available for cooling. When it increased to 10 kilowatts, there were different cooling techniques available. So cooling techniques definitely catch up to the requirement of the high density of power which is required. Today, when we are looking at the higher densities like 40 kilowatt and 100 kilowatt per rack, we are talking about things like water cooled or direct to chip cooling, where the chip is cooled directly and ambient temperature is not impacted to that extent. So you can conserve on that particular part. So it is good that we are looking this as a problem from the very beginning, because we were not able to, there's no, the demand is so that a typical Indian mindset of, adjusting could not be worked out here. It had to be a very innovative solution. And luckily, that innovative solution which has come up is not only power efficient, it is also a very sustainable solution. So when we talk about uh, direct liquid cooling, every data center would be able to optimize on their PUE. Today, some of the data center operators, the brownfield data center operators or traditional data center operators, they are operating at a 1.6, 1.7 PUE, even today. Whereas the new age data centers like ours, they have been designed at 1.3, 1.35, and we've been operating at it. But these higher density data centers, typically the AI data centers, which come up with their own cooling technologies, will further reduce this PUE to 1.2, 1.1. And now we are already talking about 1.05 to 1.06 as PUE, which means that the power is practically getting spent on the IT requirements only. There's no facility requirement, which is adding any power requirement for the cooling of the stuff. So that's a very good shift. I think, you know, uh, for any operator, adopting new technology should be the first priority. Uh, Keeping in mind the design for future is something that all of us have learned. So we are already doing that. All the operators are doing that, but quickly changing, even this space, quickly changing is will be very important.
Is there like a roadmap?
Practically, if you ask me, this is not there because, even if you ask me today, whenever there is a new requirement of a data center, it's traditionally being designed for average density, keeping average density in mind. And, that's where you would see that there would be a requirement of a real estate, there would be a requirement of a built-up area, there'll be a requirement of a white-tiled area, as we call as server halls, right? And these are designed for a average density per rack, but they are equipped to be serving the higher density as and when it comes. And as I said, these all higher density solutions come up with their own cooling solutions as well. Right? But what happens to the space wastage? Now, if you have designed your data center with an average density of, let's say, 20 kilowatts also per rack, That means, typically about 1.5 to 1.6 kilowatt per square feet of space. Um, then also, if you get a 600 kilowatt rack, which will consume only, let's say, 10 square feet of space, your rest of the space that you would have designed for white-tailed area will go waste because there's no additional power that can be served into that area. All right. So if you ask me, none of the data centers today have been made specifically for that 600 kilowatt of rack because that's a very exceptional requirement and it will not cater to. So any data center which will be specifically designed for a particular workload can be designed in such a way. But uh, now, thanks to the innovations that are happening in the data center industry, we all are geared up to cater to such requirements of higher density. But yes, there will be some, space uh, wastage that will happen later on, which, I think as a data center operator, we will all absorb that, the cost of the additional space available. Uh, However, soon we will start seeing custom built data centers for AI ready workloads. That will be the real shift that will happen to support such high density racks for a specific use cases. We are seeing that in US and all where uh, uh, advantage with them is, there's no speculative build. There's a contractual build, which is in between the operators and the consumers. In India, when we have more of a speculative build, it is difficult to design on such a scale. But uh, soon we'll everything when the dust settles, clarity is more.
All right, moving on to our next question. I'm glad you brought up edge because as AI shifts from core training to real-time inferencing, how do you see edge data centers shaping the effective deployment of AI across India?
That's a very potential question today in terms of the investment also that are getting made in India. Right now, uh, all Indian operators, whether it is the people who are taking part in AI mission, people who are building up data centers, they are all thinking about the higher density of new powerful chips that is coming from NVIDIA. And these are all used for training of the models. In artificial intelligence, it's like, creating a brain, right? When you create a brain, first you'll have to feed the data and you'll have to develop the logics so that it can start taking decisions. That is the training of the model. So training of the brain, or what we put in as an education for a child to develop the brain, that is being happening today. But the real use of artificial intelligence is actually inferencing. When artificial intelligence actually starts giving the solutions for a real life problems after being trained. Now, once being trained, when it is into inferencing stage, it has to be near to the user because the cost of carrying of the data, because every time there is a new query, you can't go to the central location, run the query, and then come, start giving the solution from there. The inferencing would definitely require the artificial intelligence setup to be near to the users. And that's where we foresee that in a very nearby future, we will see that edge locations will be of paramount importance.
See, India is one of those countries where edge is going to play a very big role, especially in the context of AI, because voice-enabled AI agents for different languages, multi-language models in India would play a major role when it comes to edge, because people will extensively use voice in India compared to any other country, in my point of view, in the upcoming decade. So, be it look at something like a banking, a lot of banking would happen through voice-enabled instructions voice recognition, face recognition kind of technologies, wherein you probably would barely need to touch a button on your phone, right? So everything will happen through voice and gestures and face recognition. So if you take banking for that as an example, edge would play a major role because a significant amount of banking in India is going to happen in the rural places. So that's where edge comes into a big play. The capacity. This is where I think the capacities need to be distributed. The capacities, AI capacities need to be planned across the country in different locations. And also all the tier 2, tier 3 cities and probably even smaller towns in some cases, we would have these small edge clusters would be implemented, just like how OTT is today being delivered. AI will do things that would be things that could be done in a fraction of a second compared to at the edge compared to what we are doing today.
What I've noticed throughout this conversation is actually the story of India that has come out the most. And I'd like to take a deep dive into India because India is positioning itself as this global AI compute destination. Given that, what structural advantages do you think India has, and what infrastructure, policy, and talent gaps must be urgently closed to compete at a global AI scale?
See, in the context of Southeast Asia, right, if you look at it, even in that context, India has quite a bit to catch up. While we talk about the opportunity, while there is opportunity and it is real and imminent, but I think there is quite a bit to catch up, even compared to some of the other smaller countries in the Southeast Asia region, and some of the capacities that are being implemented in these other countries. Policy-wise, yes, there is quite a bit of work that has been done. Implementation of those policies at scale is yet to be seen. I think a lot of good work has been done in the last 2-3 years when it comes to renewable energy, when it comes to land, when it comes access to renewable energy, all of these things and the associated policy and the associated subsidies and other things that the government is offering. All of these is yet to be implemented at scale. I think it is very important that we do this in the next 1-2 years very quickly, so that I think India becomes that much bigger hub, not just for Southeast Asia, but also for this other side of the Middle East and up to the Europe region. I think India can become the hub, because all said and done, India will still have the lowest power of cost in the region. India will have access to significant amount of land in this region. India will have the significant amount of talent and low-cost talent still in this region. Putting all of these pieces together, I think there cannot be a better location, and safety-wise, right? There cannot be a better location, because both safety in terms of, I'm not just talking about geopolitical, but also in terms of just the geographical location, the safety-wise, India, central India, and as you come into India, I think it's very safe in terms of that. And with the number of submarine landing cable installations that are being planned for India, I think it makes it a very fantastic good location. It's very good times, but having said that, a lot of work needs to be done in terms of policy, industry coming together and looking beyond the metros and looking at alternate energies and bringing in nuclear as soon as possible, right? You can't wait. This is the only way to become a leader, to implement nuclear energy and use that energy for data centers. I think India can become the leader, and India has that opportunity.
Right now, there is a definitive advantage that India has today. And that advantage is that we are a country where we have resources available, we have infrastructure available, and we have the government policy being very conducive. See, every state that you talk about has a very conducive data center policy today. At a federal level, at the central level, also, we have very conducive and very strong governance available, which is supportive of the industry. So, this is a very good time. Major ingredient or major cost of AI today is not hardware, it is not data center, it is power. And you would have also heard, uh, when Mr. Nadella was, here in India just recently, he said everybody will start talking about token per kilowatt. That means how many tokens, which is a currency in terms of AI, are you generating per kilowatt, and what is the cost per token? And India today has a unique advantage of being a country which is a power surplus country and organization availability is there in the country, and we have the right set of people. So cost advantage, skill set advantage, and data advantage. These are the three things that makes India a perfect AI capital of the world. Like we
Perfect.
used to be
Now with cloud.
in the historical time, we used to be, um, you know, a land of education, right? Where, entire, if you see prehistorical times, the major uh, people used to come from outside in our universities like Nalanda and all to get trained, right? So India has again that particular opportunity to train those AI models here in India at a cheapest cost with best of the professors and best of the data available.
From opportunities to investments, cloud, AI, edge, and enterprise demand all rising simultaneously. Which segment, according to you, will actually drive the next wave of hyperscale investment in India?
See, the next wave of hyperscale investment will be done by the applications which will be more um, uh, useful for the consumer, like what we have seen in the past, fintech driving it. You know. And the reason was very specific that it solved a particular problem of not carrying cash, everything being a digitally payable thing, right? Similarly, we saw that education took a very transformative change when COVID struck, and we were practically able to do all the education online. The examination changed a lot. Now we are seeing all the competitive examinations being held online rather than a paper thing. So now, if you ask me, Deborah, that the next wave will be healthcare. I think there is a tremendous opportunity in healthcare and the genomic development is that we are seeing, uh, majorly because of two reasons. We are getting more prone to the diseases, and second, there is a huge development that is happening in the medical field for treating us. So, both of them are very conducive in terms of the healthcare growth. Uh, and I think the next wave would be healthcare, which will require a lot of demand from all these hyperscalers and all. Uh,
Healthcare
and
will also rely quite a bit on IoT technologies, right? Given the proximity related requirements.
proximity related requirement, robotics, definitely, and these are all specific to use cases. But yes, robotics and uh, you know
IoT, IoT.
IoT, specifically from a IoT perspective, also if you look at the locational specific IoT requirements, right? Like
Yeah.
for example, driverless cars, right, where the decision making has to be split second, or any requirement at a location which is being served by IoT. These will also take a huge growth in terms of uh, the requirement of hyperscale. But as again, IoT is a is a bigger term. Underlying, there are different use cases which are there from IoT perspective also. So, IoT in healthcare, for example, will be offered major use cases. Uh, these locational things will be differently. Use case will be there. But immediately, I think healthcare definitely will score a little more point in terms of the requirements from hyperscale investments.
I think
Kalyan?
all of the all of the above, and I'll tell you why. Especially in the context of India, it's the citizen services and the services that will be taken to the population at large is what will drive the capacity in the context of India. Because people will use AI, the cloud will continue to grow, and hence data center capacity needs to increase. So all of the above will drive a lot of, and the enterprises will increase their cloud and AI usage and installations because of more and more capacity requirements to serve the population. So I think India has that fantastic advantage and opportunity, not just for hyperscalers, but anybody who is trying to implement AI-based solutions for enterprises in India. So I think, in large, it's all of the above that will increase the requirements for hyperscalers in the context of India.
Perfect. Now, throughout this discussion, we have come across many different ideas suggested for growing the market here in India and helping it evolve to its potential. If I were to ask you to choose just one big move, whether it is policy, technology, business model, or partnership, that can define India's AI and cloud future, what would you pick? What is that one big?
I would pick policy and technology because policy is very important for the industry at large, all the way from the power, the feasibility of power, availability of alternate energies, implementation of alternate energies. It's extremely important from a policy perspective. One is the policy, big one. Number two is technology, because today, in a very long time, the software, the innovations in software in the context of India has fallen behind. Because the reason I say that is because today's costs of AI, the unit of economics is so high that the benefits of AI today, it's extremely difficult these price points to reach the end consumer, which is the citizen of India. We need to bring that down significantly, and that's where software can play a role. And the parallel that we can draw for that is the implementation of Aadhaar and UPI and all these digital payments. Why UPI is so successful, why digital banking has become so successful, is because UPI was implemented at a tenth of the cost of what a similar digital payment would have been implemented in another country. So, and that's because of what I call is that Indian innovation that has been, out of the box and thinking, and that could have been implemented at scale in the context of UPI, right? A similar, thought process, a similar invention needs to happen in the software industry out here. And that's where I think the reason I'm saying the software is significantly behind in that context, because until and unless that innovations happen in the software field out of India to bring the advantage of AI at a fraction of a cost to the end consumer, it is extremely difficult to scale the advantage of AI at the scale of the population in India, right? So India is a low cost, it's everything. It is, everything has to be worth the penny. And it's extremely important, right, for the end consumer who is sitting in a village to get that benefit of AI, just like how he got the benefit of a digital payment through UPI at a fraction of the cost. So that's the innovation that the software industry in India is lacking behind, and that needs to happen, and that needs to change to take AI to the last mile.
It has to be a combination. If you ask me only one thing, yes, definitely you put me in spot. But I think with continual improvement in all four of it, right? Whether you talk about policy, whether you talk about technology, whether you talk about uh, partnerships, I think everywhere we are seeing that there is a positive development which is happening. But what made it will drive for India, these things will be common for everything. But how India will get advantages in terms of the policies, because policy and policy, the speed of delivering the policy and speed of execution of that particular policy will be of paramount importance. As you rightly said, we've been talking about the policy, and now the draft policy is very conducive, but we are still awaiting for the policy to be implemented, right? Recently, we were in one of the states where data center policy is in place, but there are certain uh, addendums which have not been, put into action. We're talking about DPDP, but we are still, little relaxed about the implementation of the DPDP Act. So one policy, the change in policies or the policy making should be fast, and second, the implementation of policy has to be very impactful. So that will give India a distinctive advantage in terms of leapfrogging the AI wave.
Um, Thank you so much for sharing all that wisdom with us and joining us today. Kalyan Muppaneni, founder and CEO of 5 Data Centers, and Amit Agrawal, President Techno Digital. I hope to see both of you at the Chennai CDC in May this year. Before we go, let me quickly tell our podcast viewers and listeners that we are returning to Chennai with the 5th edition of the Chennai Cloud and Data Center Convention in May. Simultaneously, you will also be hosting the 2nd edition of Chennai Interconnect World, a technology conference focused on India's connectivity ecosystem. If you want to know more, do write into us at India@W.Media. For now, thanks so much for watching and for tuning in. We will see you again soon. Until next time, bye-bye.